Hi bestie! Welcome back sa aking channel kung saan ay nagpapublish ako weekly ng videos about personal finance, business, self-development, at kung ano-ano pang content na mag-i-improve sa overall life quality mo. Huwag na nating patagalin pa. Narito ang 6 na ipon tips na magpapayaman sa'yo kahit maliit ang sahod mo. Bago natin simulan, makikisuyo naman ako sa'yo bestie. Pakiclick naman ang like and subscribe button. Madami kang matututunan sa channel ko, promise. So without further ado, let's go! Tip number 1. Practice the 50-30-20 rule. So ano nga ba yung 50-30-20 rule? Ang ibig sabihin nito ay hatiin mo ang sahod mo into 3 portions. 50%, 30%, and 20%. Yung 50% ay mapupunta sa needs o necessary things like rent, food, utilities, internet, etc. Yung 30% naman ay mapupunta sa wants o unnecessary things like new gadgets, new shoes or bag para mag-enjoy ka naman. Yung 20% naman ay mapupunta sa savings. Pero remember, hindi ito fixed at pwede mong i-adjust ang percentage that will cater to your needs. For example, kung hindi ka naman maluho na tao, you can reduce the wants portion. Let's say 5% na lang instead of 30%. Tapos, yung nabawas mo sa wants, idagdag mo na lang sa savings mo, di ba? Applicable ito sa lahat ng tao basta kumikita ng pera, maliit man o malaki. Kaya bestie, start practicing the 50-30-20 rule to speed up your savings. Tip number 2. Set up your emergency fund. Ngayong pinapractice mo na ang 50-30-20 rule, next priority mo is setting up your emergency fund. Yung 20% savings mo ay dito dapat napupunta. Your target amount for your emergency fund is 6 months worth of your expenses. So, for example, gumagastos ka ng 10k monthly for your needs. Ang target emergency fund mo is 6 months worth of that amount. So, 60k ang target natin for this example. I recommend na gumawa ka ng separate bank account for your emergency fund or kahit mobile banking like GCash or Tonic. Bakit separate? Kasi hindi mo dapat ito galawin unless in case of emergency. Dahil kapag isinama mo ito sa main bank account mo, malamang ay magagalaw mo ito sooner or later. Remember, for emergency use only. And by the way, bestie, remind lang kita na yung latest iPhone or yung bagong labas na sneakers, hindi emergency yun ha. Tip number 3. Invest your savings. Ito naman yung next priority mo pag nabuo mo na yung emergency fund mo. Again, yung 20% savings mo, dito naman siya dapat mapunta after you set up your emergency fund. Remember bestie, na hindi mo dapat gamitin ang emergency fund mo to invest. Your emergency fund should remain liquid, meaning you can liquidate or withdraw your emergency fund anytime without hassle dahil walang pinipiling oras ang emergency. Sa investments kasi, hindi liquid ang pera mo dyan, meaning hindi mo yan mawi-withdraw agad-agad when the need arises. Usually may time frame yan na hindi mo magagalaw yung pera mo. Pero normal lang yun because mas malaki ang kikitain ng pera mo sa investments compared sa regular savings account. Madami kang options on where to invest your money. Stocks, mutual funds, time deposits, or even physical commodities like gold and silver. At madami pang iba, all of which have their own pros and cons. And depende na lang sa risk tolerance mo kung ano ang nababagay na investment para sa'yo. I won't go too deep into the details of each of these investments. Pero huwag ka mag-alala bestie. Gagawan ko ng separate video yan to discuss the different investment vehicles, okay? Next, tip number 4. Create multiple sources of income. As you finish setting up your emergency fund and investment portfolio, you can now choose to set aside a portion of your salary to create capital. Ito ay ang pera na pwede mong gamitin to create other sources of income. Hiwalay ito sa emergency fund and investments mo ha. Bakit hiwalay na naman? Kasi ito yung pera na dapat willing kang i-let go or maglaho na parang bula. In other words, willing kang isugal ang perang ito dahil in the process of creating multiple sources of income, like any businesses, failure is always a possibility. But remember that failure is a normal part of the process to be successful. That's why I always tell people na don't quit your job when creating your side businesses because there's always the chance of failing. Pero huwag kang mapanghinaan ng loob, bestie. Just like failure, there's also always the chance of succeeding. Kaya look at the bright side and be positive in any endeavor, okay? Next. Tip number 5. Avoid bad debts. So ano nga ba yung bad debts? Ito ay yung mga inutang mong pera para ipambili ng bagay na wala namang ROI or return on investment. For example, may bagong labas na iPhone worth 70k, usong-uso. Kung tutusin, mabigat sa bulsa yon, magbibilin mo ng one-time payment. So, nag-decide kang bilhin yung iPhone with 5 years to pay. Kahit yung current phone mo, kakabili mo lang 6 months ago. That's bad debt and that's impractical. Yan ang mga dapat mong iwasan. As described by United Nations, debt bondage is the modern day slavery. Kaya huwag ka magpapaalipin sa bad debt. Instead, gumamit ka ng good debts. Ang good debts ay yung mga perang inutang mo to spend on something na may ROI. For example, meron kang LPG business. Sa LPG business, kailangan mo ng motorcycle for delivery. So, you decided to get 1 unit of motorcycle with 5 years to pay terms. Yan, good debt yan. Dahil yung motor na hinuhulugan mo ay hindi luho, kundi necessity sa business mo. Kaya bestie, avoid bad debts ha. Tip number 6. Track your expenses. So bakit nga pa kailangan natin i-track yung expenses natin? The reason is simple. For us to be able to see kung saan yung blind spot natin in terms of spending habits. Dati akala ko tama lang naman yung expenses ko, hindi naman ako sumusobra. But when I started tracking my expenses, by the end of the month, doon ko nakita yung blind spot ko. Na-realize ko na sobra-sobra na pala yung gastos ko sa isang bagay and dapat na itong bawasan. That's the benefit of tracking. It makes you see yung akala mong wala namang mali or wala namang sobra. And it also gives you the opportunity to correct your mistakes in your spending habits. You can use mobile apps for tracking your expenses or simply write it down sa notebook every time gagastos ka. But I highly recommend using apps kasi it's very convenient. Nasa phone mo lang siya tapos you can input your expenses anytime. And madami diyang free expense tracker apps. Search mo lang sa App Store or Play Store, bestie. At ito ang 6 na ipon tips na magpapayaman sa'yo kahit maliit ang sahod mo. Alin dito ang mga ginagawa mo na? Malaki na ba ang naipon mo? Paki-comment naman sa comment section para ma-share natin sa mga bestie natin. Kung nagustuhan mo ang video na ito, pasuyo naman ako ng like and subscribe button para updated ka sa future videos ko that will bring out the best version of you. Dito lang sa Pinoy Best You. Maraming salamat sa panonood.